Hey, welcome to Barnstorming PA. We've got sort of a hot take, quick take. I feel like the State of the Union was it last night? Was it just 24 hours ago, or was it? I don't even know.
What are days anymore? Does anyone
What are
know?
days anymore? I don't know. But
It was
this is
Tuesday. It's always on a Tuesday.
we are live now. So if people are on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube and you see you chime in, feel free to drop a comment, and we do get to see those. Anyway, so this is Jordy Comas, half of the co-production team, and I'm thrilled to have on. If anybody's an OG Barnstormer, it's Dwayne Heisler. Dwayne, say hi.
Hello. Hi. I'm just doing as I'm told today. Hi, everyone. My name is Dwayne Heisler. My day job is with SEIU Healthcare, PA. SEIU is Service Employees International Union. So I'm a union guy, but at the same time, very active in the Democratic Party. I'm on the executive committee for the state Democratic Party, chair of the Progressive Caucus, and the state committee person for Columbia County. But I'm coming to you live from Lackawanna County and Scranton, where my new home is. So
yeah,
good to be here.
Since November, roughly, is that right? Of last year,
it was right after Thanksgiving. Yep, you're right, Jordy.
Yeah. It's a beautiful home. As I said, I'm one of the co-producers. If you're new to the show, I've been a many things: a professor, a chef, an organizer, and most recently, I just started a gig as the canvassing and training director for Action Together NEPA, which is an organization. Dwayne, I should know. Did you help start it, or you were one of the original?
Yeah, well, in a way, yeah. I'm on the board of directors now, but I was one of the
Oh my
founding
God, you're my boss.
Wow. No, it's not like that. We're co-workers, right? So, but I was one of the founding members of Columbia County Indivisible, which eventually merged with Action Together to bring another county into their footprint. So, in a way, yeah,
sure.
We both started almost exactly the same time, and they eventually came together.
Yeah, no, that's all true, and I think both Columbia County Indivisible, which, as you just described, became the strong Western geographic arm of Action Together NEPA. Like a lot of, and this happens from my own life experience and from my knowledge of politics. Something like Trump being elected creates a real wave of interest and people coming together to resist, and not all of those organizations live, and going from street energy to kind of sustained energy isn't easy. So Action Together is a real success story. And, some of the key leadership, Alicia Hoffman-Milovich and Jess Britton and the current board, which you're on, secured grant money. And so now there's more people as staff. So it's all really exciting.
That original chapter is now Columbia Montour Action Together. That chapter, kind of the southern western part of our footprint.
Yeah. There is actually, Dwayne and I were looking at a map about congressional districts. And there was a moment where I think you were trying to remember Wayne versus Pike, because we look at these maps and many times they don't have the county name. And I know, like, as a little thing, there's an online quiz where it'll just give me the outline and I have to guess the names. And at best, I'm 48 or 49. I mean, do you think you would be good? Do you think, you think you could, because you have, I mean, I'm not trying to like have a quiz off. I mean, we can try it in private sometime and see how you do, but.
We should do that. I'm really fuzzy with the Western counties. So I wouldn't do. I'd have to do a quick study of it. I couldn't just do it.
Well, and this one is like the hardest because it's just the name and the outline. It doesn't, like if you gave me the county name and asked me to drop it as if it were a jigsaw puzzle, I would do better, right? Like if you gave me Montgomery, I know where that goes. But when it's just, I have to figure out, like you said, like that southwest corner, Greene, Jefferson, Somerset, I'm like, oh, it's one of those. Never 100% sure.
Well, I mean, the real challenge is, and it's crazy, we have 67 counties in this state, which is absurd. And actually, there's studies that show how that actually hurts our economic development too. You have one county that has its own airport, the neighboring county has its own airport, and both of them are struggling because neither one of them can support the traffic. Whereas if they had just been one county, they could have had one airport, and there could have been some good economic, it would be more of an economic engine.
I
and
love
then
this.
Expenses too. Each one has their own courthouses and their own court systems, and their own little kingdoms, and it becomes really challenging.
No, that's such a great point. And like, as you're saying that, I'm thinking about, I don't know the history of when the 67 finalized. I mean, we all know that's, originally there were some that were much larger. Where I live, Union County, there's a historic marker saying it was carved out in the 1870s or 80s from what had been Northumberland County. But I was just thinking about, like, this is a factoid I have memorized, that Forest County has got a little over 5,000 people, right? So you go from that. Philadelphia is itself a county of, got to be 1 million plus, just Philadelphia County. Montgomery County, Delaware County, those counties are several 100,000 or more. And so the fact that they're called counties and they're both expected, and even to go away from that, even like Center County is, got to have maybe 100 or 150,000 people compared to Forest County, 5,000 people. So if you were trying to think about efficient administrative units, you would go for equal population, is I guess what I was really geeking out on. Oh, look, we've got at least one viewer on Facebook, it looks like. So if you're on Facebook, feel free to drop it. We're going to start talking about the State of the Union in just a sec. And if you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to drop those in there. Because Dwayne and I are so busy fighting the good fight, each of us on our own, and and shout out to all the people out there like that. I literally didn't know it was the State of the Union until it was Tuesday night. Now that I think about it,
or Wednesday, I don't even remember. Was it?
It was definitely Tuesday, because Wednesday night I went out with some friends to a bar instead of doing this.
Are you sure? Were you sober? Do you really remember? I don't know, Jordy. And by the way, I'm shouting out your cooking skills. We talked about you coming up here, and you knew it was after Thanksgiving because you came to this little. It was a staggered, as safe as we could be, little open house, and you made a kick-ass like paella.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, it was good. So good. Still thinking about that.
That was a good times. No, you're welcome. So the State of the Union was Tuesday. Let's just go. I've got a few things highlighted from the speech that I might throw out, but well, actually, I want to do a different thing first. Like, in your heart of hearts, how much do you think it matters for, like, between now and the elections in the fall and all the things that we think about and worry about, and getting power to use power? Like, do you think it matters a little, a lot? Where are you on that?
I think each State of the Union stands as its own, and we have to think of the kind of the zeitgeist of the moment, and the fact that he devoted so much time to what's happening in Ukraine and the war in Europe. I think could be seen, as we look back, as a turning point of where things were moving, and also a turning point perhaps, and I don't know this because I haven't seen any stats on it. I know they kind of tail off and do different things with as time goes by, but I think that what he was able to do and to communicate might have had an impact on people's view about what was happening and what was going on. So I would say, and I can't imagine this not being the dominant, whatever is happening or going to happen, I can't imagine that that's not going to be the dominant narrative in the American public as we move forward. So I would have to say that it does matter. And we all have to think about, as the elections are coming up, how are we rejoining that message and what's happening there and what it means. And for me, there's a lot to unpack there. But one of the things I'm thinking about is how people in the Ukraine are struggling for their country, right? They're struggling for their democracy. And in some ways, we're tied to that as well here. We are struggling for our democracy. There's a lot of parallels. Now, I'm not pretending to think that we have the struggles that they had there with bombs dropping and families being split up and all the refuge, all the things, right? But there are some ties where we can understand what is happening there in terms of our government and the importance of having a voice in the government, which they are all in fear of losing. right now. So so that was a long way of saying I think it's very important, and that each State of the Union kind of stands on it. Maybe there's other ones that aren't as important, but this one was critical, and I thought the timing was incredible.
So I'm so glad we're doing this, Dwayne, because just getting to do these podcasts is like just getting to talk to somebody like you who's paying attention and you're insightful and smart, and you've got your own perspectives. Like, it's reminding me of things. So one is, I'm going to be a little bit different. Like, I think that they're kind of overblown how much they matter, right? I think kind of like a graduation speech, you got to have one, but nobody quite remembers what happened at their high school or college graduation speech. And that, the kind of media talking classes, it's a big deal for them. But especially something we might get to later. And in my memory, this maybe started with Clinton, with just a lot of policy proposals. And I think for your average listener, in the later part of his speech where he was talking about COVID and other things, he's laying down a lot of markers, and it may be very important for Congress for sure, right? And sort of laying down markers about bills and stuff. But I think for most viewers, it kind of can go over their head. But the other thing you said that is super important is how much it, as you said, was so much about Ukraine at the beginning. I don't know if our viewers live can see this. Can you see the screen share I got, Dwayne, where I highlighted?
Yeah, it's kind of small, but I can see it. The throughout our history, right? Is that
Yeah, go ahead and read that if you want.
Yeah. Boy, I don't have my glasses.
Oh, no, never mind. I'll read it. Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. This is from the speech. Throughout our history, we've learned this lesson. When dictators do not pay a price for their aggression, they cause more chaos. They keep moving, and the costs, the threats to America, and America to the world keeps rising. Hey, kudos to the White House for being honest, right? I sort of read through his stumble there. This was, I think, a literal transcript, because another place where I highlighted it, there was a little bit of a repetition of a word. But anyway, I'll tell you why Dwayne, I'll throw it to you. Okay. First thing I think is interesting is from, my vast experience and knowledge of White House speech writing, which is almost nothing and limited to the West Wing. I'm pretty sure this speech started a long time ago, right? Which means that they pivoted. They made some decisions in the last 7 or 8 days, or the 6 or 7 days before the speech, to make this the opening framing, right? And your comments reminded me of that. Like, as a political decision, I don't know, after 9/11 maybe, but I feel like the sort of conventional wisdom is Americans don't care a lot about foreign policy, especially post the George Bush war in Iraq and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, which creates such war weariness, right? So I didn't look at the last several speeches, and I may be totally wrong, but I'm guessing that several of the last recent ones did not start so strongly on foreign policy. So I think you're right that it's really notable for that.
Well, and here's the thing, like, if we dig into that one sentence right there, just a little bit of the two sentences there, whatever it is, like, my big takeaway, what that screams is the word accountability, right? When you think about this, what he's saying is that when dictators aren't paying a price, when there's no accountability, and by definition, dictatorship means little, none, or little, very little accountability, maybe to his generals, perhaps to his people when they rise up, but otherwise none, right? That's the definition of dictator, not checking with anyone, as opposed to a democracy. And so in so many ways, we can relate to that, because we are always talking in this country, because we're a democracy, about holding our elected officials accountable. That doesn't happen over there, right? That's not what happens in a dictatorship. And so this really rings true, and so I think there's so many parallels to what is happening and how we can, learn lessons when we're looking at what's happening internationally, what's happening, even in a war, of what's going on here, and thinking about what our country is currently going through. What is the moment we're experiencing in the United States, and how can we really relate to this? And so I love the way the White House laid that out, because, like you said, this is not the high school graduation. Like, I saw it and thought immediately, wow, this is kind of important to the United States. It's really important to my neighbors here in Scranton. It's really important to the fights that we have in Pennsylvania, right? I mean, honestly, I mean, we shouldn't have our state politics be another casualty of some kind of radical, or some kind of, not a dictatorship necessarily, but I mean of having. I mean, right now our voting rights are being threatened throughout this whole country, right? And so we can't allow that to become the next victim because we're paying attention to the war and not the election that we have in 2022, which is so important.
Absolutely. I'll say that, to me, it was interesting because, and I have a feeling you'll probably agree with me. I don't actually think we do nearly enough to hold our leaders accountable. And that phrase that I read, to me, also speaks to January 6th and to Trump's, to Trump's and his minions' efforts to overturn the election. And we, and even more so, and this may be a longer topic we want to get into now. I think it's important that there's been investigations of the people who actually stormed the Capitol. But I've been really frustrated that we seem to be locking up the foot soldiers and not the planners.
That's a really important point, and another way to relate to it too, because of this fascism that we're seeing in our country. That's exactly what it is. The very same people who were threatening our democracy and trying to take away our freedom to vote in January 6th are the same people that are trying to take away our votes right now, that are introducing all these bills into our state legislatures and are doing those same things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many parallels to this. And this is where, if we don't stand up to it, just as if we don't stand up to the dictator, and like you said, we don't have enough accountability, it's on us, right? We are the ones we've been looking for. It's the people it's the citizens of the United States. And
right.
Time for us to stand up and say, no, you cannot take away my voting rights. You cannot make it more challenging, more difficult. You should not be creating huge lines. You should be, should be doing everything you can, or we should be doing everything that we can as a country to make voting easy, not more challenging. And then when you question, why are they making it more challenging? It's because they want to win, right?
Yep.
Like they want power, right? That's what's going on. And someone needs to stand up for the average citizen and help them to understand what's happening in the country right now.
Absolutely. I think that's the thing. And again, I'm not a foreign policy expert, and I feel less like past major conflicts. Well, we are not as involved in this one, but I would have known a lot more just because of sort of where I was in my life and different things. I've probably told you a story, but when I was 18 was when I turned 18 was the summer of the Iraq invasion of Kuwait, and some of the first activism I was very involved in was that peace movement. But sorry, what I was going to say was that. So my impression, and I'm just echoing a lot of what I see in media, not just American. I've been looking at The Guardian a lot. I really like The Guardian in England, really good newspaper. But going back to what you're saying, that the thing that it seems that Putin overestimated was how much all Ukrainians, many of whom are ethnically Russian or Russian speaking as their first language, from what I understand, they have rallied to this. And Zelensky, who's, a lot of people are praising him, and I'm not going to go out too far on a limb on that because Ukrainian politics are a bit weird. And, he's probably not a saint, but he's really in the moment, right, is so clearly a real democratically elected leader compared to Putin, right? Like he looks so much better in contrast. And I think that ties to what you were saying. And why, I hope this makes sense, and why for Putin, he did a good job of centering this on the Ukrainian people, right? And on the struggle for democracy, as opposed to a speech about how we've got to go into Kuwait or Iraq because we have to spread democracy. The Ukrainian people are in the front line, and they've really dominated the media narrative. And so I think that Biden smartly and his speechwriters were piggybacking on that. One thing I just looked up, and I'm not surprised, Pennsylvania is the second largest state in the United States with Ukrainian Americans at 122,000. And I'm not surprised, but I haven't seen anything specific about Pennsylvania. Have you?
Well, here's a surprising fun fact. When I was a little kid living in Brooklyn. As a little kid, I lived on the north side. It's kind of like the Williamsburg area. I lived on North 7th Street. I went to PS 17, Public School 17. I went there for a little while, and then I was pulled out, and I went to a Ukrainian Catholic school called Holy Ghost. It scared my sister because it had the word ghost in it.
Well,
And we actually had to learn Ukrainian. Like that.
really?
Yes, and oh boy, did I suck at it. Oh my, I couldn't even figure out the alphabet. I had a hard time. Honestly, my teacher had more nose hair than it was very distracting. No, I was like, you could braid that. I was like, as a little kid, like, oh my gosh, I can't focus. Like, what is this? What's happening? Thank goodness I had some friends in the class that were helping me with my homework. So I wasn't surprised to see New York is number one, right? We have I mean, we are truly a melting pot. And this is really important because we always hear why we can't have good things. Like we can never, один, два, три, четыре, пять, шесть, семь, восемь, девять. I don't know that my numbers, is that even right? I don't know. That's as a little kid, like I'm like in second grade or third grade. So there you go. That's all I know. But anyway, people are always telling us, our opposition is always telling us, Jordy, that we can't have good things. We can't have universal health care. Mm-hmm. We can't have like free kindergarten. Like we can't have medical leave. Like we can't have these good things. And the reason that they tell us we can't have good things, it's because of some other person, right? Someone who doesn't look like us. We blame others for not having it. The opposition message is always about dividing us, right? And that's in direct conflict to the concept that I think is truly American of, give me your tired and your poor, the Statue of Liberty, the idea that we are a melting pot and that our diversity is our strength. This is a constant battle that we have in this country. And by the way, their message is always about how bad government is, right? And when we look at things like, I came here, I drove up to Scranton on an interstate. That wasn't built, that was built by our taxpayer dollars, right? There's a lot of good things that government has done, continues to do. Like government shouldn't get involved, but don't touch my Medicare, right? or don't touch my Social Security. It's amazing to me that there's this conflict and the lines are so clear about this and it relates directly to who we are. Now, I believe no matter where you come from, is it Brooklyn? Is it out in Forest County, Pennsylvania, like we were talking about earlier?
Population 5,000, yeah.
Yeah, no matter where you come from, we have a shared value, right? We all and make sure that our families have good health care, make sure that our friends, families, relatives are well educated and are able to get good jobs and, those kind of things. And the opposition is always telling us why we can't that, and they're blaming someone else. Like that magical immigrant who is both at the same time taking our jobs, right? But they're also lazy and they don't do anything. I don't know how that's possible, right? So, I don't believe that. I don't repeat that messaging. I am all about the idea that I believe that we are stronger when we come together, and this is about accountability, that we can actually have good things.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. One of the things for me, I'm going to push you to maybe look at some of the things that are kind of I see as tensions within what we call like progressive values, progressive space. So like with this issue, like it's there for me at least, right? Like just speaking from the heart, like I see what's going on with Ukrainian people and I'm like, that's absolutely horrible. And at the same time, I'm not a pacifist, but like, most wars, the US and NATO and other countries jump into quickly, right? So it's easy, I think, and I've seen a lot of people be like, well, the US should do this or that, or NATO. And I don't know. And then at a deeper level, like, I think we need to say these things like, where were we for Syria? I saw a news story that Germany announced that anybody with a Polish passport could have free transport on the rail lines just by having a Ukrainian passport. And meanwhile, in the Mediterranean Sea and in other places, that there are Syrians, there are Iraqis, there are Afghanis, there are so many places in the world. And, it's no accident they're not white people. And at the same time, when things are going on in Syria, I'm going to say like I didn't know who was the good guys, right? Like who are we? And I'm putting that in air quotes on a podcast. So, and meanwhile, I think that the right, especially the kind of what's left of kind of the think tanks and the brainy right, they really enjoy saying like, well, we're realists, right? And we're smart and we don't sort of fall for those like fuzzy ideals about like peace and diplomacy. And that's still out there too. There's a certain, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it kind of bugs me because they act like, if you think that there should be a higher ideal than just sort of the law of the jungle and each nation state beating itself up, that you're kind of naive and idealistic. And to me, I'm like, no, I get it. There's real geopolitics here, right? And I can talk about that, and also hope and imagine that things like the UN, which is of course flawed and fragmented because of Russia's role in the Security Council and other things, like both things can be true. So I'm just kind of want to throw out that to me, like a progressive response is kind of tricky. I feel like it's kind of tricky because, well, I'll just leave it there. And then, do you have any thoughts about that? Like, what is a clear progressive response? I think it's tricky.
Well, I don't know that it is. I think I mean war is tricky, right? Like that's a terrible way of saying it. But I think that we have to. I don't know. I've been really trying to purposefully think about shared values, right? And I think that that's what helps to provide clarity to statements, and I don't know, when we look at like other scenarios or other things in our past, those are all true, but it shouldn't really change like the ability to have a clear statement going forward, right? I'm not saying that we should ignore what's in our past. We should learn from it. But honestly, Jordy, there's a reason why when you're driving your car, your rear view mirror is only this big and your windshield is huge, right? We should be looking at where we're going, where we want to go as like a country. We want to go as a species, where we want to go as the human race, right? And understand there is a rear view mirror and tap into that when we really need that guidance or those corrective things. But I don't think it should prevent us. If we spend too much time in the rearview mirror, we're going to fucking crash, right? Like we need to look forward and we need to be able to kind of guide ourselves and use
well,
that.
Let me throw this out to you. Going back to like the 1800s, there was a thread of what then would have been called sort of, liberal thought, or, we would identify as leftist thought. One thing that not a lot of people know is that the Pledge of Allegiance was part of a movement that started in Europe where each country would have a Pledge of Allegiance, and it was kind of a generic one. And we added things over the years. But there was a kind of sense of like, we want a universalism of all nations, and also a sense that like, and this makes sense, especially in the European context, but in many parts of the world, that nationalism was a force, right, that would lead to war and dividing people. And so I think we inherit that sometimes. And I know people who are academics, for example, who will say that, basically like nationalism is bad, right? And so we should have peace among all people. And then, so that's one thing. A second thing is, as somebody, who's a student of history and social sciences, I don't think that's realistic, right? Like, I think we can have an identity that we're all humans, but it's never sufficient. We have other identities. And so I think that there is a need to, I think that there's a place for national identities when they can be divorced from violent state power. And so that's the place that I'm sort of myself reaching for. And this is somewhat informed by my own family experience with Catalonia in Spain. I believe in Catalan identity. I'm not really sure that a separate Catalan state is a great thing. And I don't support a Catalan ethnocentrism that would exclude other people from like the economy and the civil society. And I want to play for you this speech from Martin Kimani. I hope I'm saying his name right. He's a Kenyan diplomat. And he gave the speech at the State of the Union. And to me, he did a far better job than I just did. So, it's probably new for you, Dwayne. You hadn't had a chance to hear it. So I'm going to play it, and then we'll get your take on it. So let me pull it.
Cool. All right. Will our viewers be able to see it too?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, cool.
I give the floor to the permanent representative of Kenya.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Undersecretary General Rosemary DiCarlo for her briefing. We meet tonight on the brink of a major conflict in Ukraine. The diplomacy we urged on the 17th of February is failing. The territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine stands breached. the Charter of the United Nations continues to wilt under the relentless assault of the powerful. In one moment, it is invoked with reverence by the very same countries who then turn their backs on it in pursuit of objectives diametrically opposed to international peace and security. In the last two meetings on the situation in Ukraine and the buildup of forces by the Russian Federation, Kenya urged that diplomacy be given a chance. Our cry was not heeded, and more importantly, the Charter's demand for states to settle their international disputes by peaceful means in such a manner that international peace and security and justice are not endangered has been profoundly undermined.
Dwayne, I'm going to try and see if I can find, there was a sort of more, this is the whole thing, and there was a shorter clip. Let's see if this works.
Of African Unity and the United Nations Charter.
Yeah, this is it. Okay, I hope this works.
Okay, cool.
Kenya and almost every African country
Oh, I should have just let it play. I should have known better.
states. In our considered view, this action and announcement breaches the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We do not deny that there may be serious security concerns in these regions, but they cannot justify today's recognition of these regions as independent states, not when there are multiple diplomatic tracks available and underway that have the ability to offer peaceful solutions. Mr. President, this situation echoes our history. Kenya and almost every African country was birthed by the ending of empire. Our borders were not of our own drawing. They were drawn in the distant colonial metropoles of London, Paris, and Lisbon, with no regard for the ancient nations that they cleaved apart. Today, across the border of every single African country live our countrymen with whom we share deep historical, cultural, and linguistic bonds. At independence, had we chosen to pursue states on the basis of ethnic, racial, or religious homogeneity, we would still be waging bloody wars these many decades later. Instead, we agreed that we would settle for the borders that we inherited, but we would still pursue continental political, economic, and legal integration. Rather than form nations that looked ever backwards into history with a dangerous nostalgia, we chose to look forward to a greatness none of our many nations and peoples had ever known.
Okay, that was the key part. What do you think? Does that speak to you?
I feel that he was like driving the car and talking about the rearview mirror and looking forward, like almost like kind of what I would. It's funny that you played that because I didn't see that before, but it really, I mean, he really framed the issue of looking at the past in Africa and how those borders were something that they inherited, that their ancient lands were cleaved apart, but instead of like digging in on they decided to accept what they had and then say, let's look forward and let's see how we can build our bonds and let's see how we can unite and integrate and those kind of things. And I think that that's what I was saying in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, that's interesting. Cool.
And I love that, because I feel like there's a kind of there can be kind of a narrow or simple understanding, and Putin is playing into this of like, this is our eternal land, or these are our eternal people. And that's the kind of dangerous side. And like I said before, especially when it's married to state violence and political and economic power, that's different than expressions of cultural identity. You mentioned going to Ukrainian school. I have a friend whose grandparents are Ukrainian, and she has stories about Ukrainian Christmas traditions. And so, if I just think, Martin Kimani, the Kenyan diplomat, I mean, somebody whose whole life was born out of, a kind of imperial domination that we don't know, for him to stand up and say, what we inherited sucked. it was, our country's destinies were the playthings of people drawing the lines in the metropoles. And that's true for the Ukraine and to some extent too with the Soviet Union. And we said, we make a different choice, right? We make a choice to say, we'll just deal with these borders that are imperfect, right? And then create and sort of aim for economic and cultural cooperation across borders. Like, to me, that's an important, when I saw it, for me, it helped to fill that sort of space I was saying, which was like, as a progressive, how do we deal with like solidarity and, wanting war to be the last outcome, and when it so often seems kind of a first outcome. So and he's like the perfect messenger because he's from that experience. So
yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, maybe let's pivot. I kind of want to jump to what stood out for me as one of the major moments and lines in the speech about domestic policy. And I'm not sharing the screen, but it was about, I'm going to read it. Just give me half a sec to find it here. It was after he talked about healthcare. And he said he wanted to bridge the issues around racial justice, police accountability. And so in the speech, he says, the American Rescue Plan, sorry, let's go back. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen so you can see it too.
Okay.
So this is where he's trying to, I probably didn't set that up very well. He's trying to bridge the complexities of people want safer communities. Also, people want to know that the police are not an irredeemably violent, oppressive force, right? And I think we all know since 2020 and even before, it's 10 years since the Black Lives Matter movement started. This is not an easy topic for our political system to handle. So he says, the American Rescue Plan, let's not abandon our streets, or this is Biden's words, let's not abandon our streets or choose between safety and equal justice. Let's come together to protect our communities, restore trust, and hold law enforcement accountable. That's why the Justice Department has required body cameras, banned chokeholds, and restricted no-knock warrants for its officers. That's why the American Rescue Plan that you all provided, that's why the American Rescue Plan that you all, there's a mistake here in the sentence. It's not me. That's why the American Rescue Plan, I'm going to say that was passed, that you all passed, provided $350 billion that states, cities, and counties can use to hire more police, invest in more proven strategies like community violence interruption, trusted messengers breaking the cycle of violence and trauma, and giving young people some hope. And then here's the big line. We should all agree that the answer is not to defund the police. It's to fund the police, fund them with the resources and training they need to protect our communities. I was watching it live. A bunch of Republicans stood up when he said fund the police. What's your take?
Well, pick and choose, is this like a buffet or something? Like, take any words out of context. Like, there was a whole paragraph that you read before he said fund the police, which explained exactly what that was supposed to be. But they grabbed onto the sound bait by, maybe they were, I don't know, whistling in the wind. Maybe they were listening to the lawnmower. I don't know. But when they heard fund the police, they thought, oh, it's my turn to like, yay, and stand up and do whatever because I'm going to have my own meeting. In other words, they treated it as if it was a dog whistle, right? A racist dog whistle, which is how people have been using that kind of tool. And so they thought, oh, I can use this as a dog whistle. Like, when I hear someone say, fund the police or don't fund the police, I know what they're really saying, right? Are we thinking about like white families and black families? Like, what are we thinking about, right? And so that's what they did. So I just think, they took it completely out of context. There was a paragraph before it. There was sentences after it as well that talked about what he meant by it. And they just grabbed the soundbite and thought, this is a great moment for me to stand up, showing that I believe in funding the police, right? And they're just trying to harken back to that. You don't even have to harken back. It's still an ongoing struggle about how we address policing in this country, And yeah.
I mean, watching it and in the moment watching it, so I have a different take, but like watching it, to me, it seemed like a decision and a calculation about trying to shift the political rhetoric. My opinion is that there's a lot of people in Democratic sort of policy and not policy, sorry, like people who think about Democratic elections and politics who have drawn conclusions about from 2020 and how close it was and the relationship between the Black Lives Matter movement and its rhetoric and Democratic political fortunes. And they're looking at 2022, and they've decided that anything that sounds like abolition or defund is toxic, and they need to put it at arm's length. And this was a place to put a marker about it. And maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. I feel.
What he said before he said defund the police. What do you think about everything that he said before he said the words defund the police? What do you think about that?
I think it's the minimum, ban chokeholds, body cameras, and more accountability, qualified immunity. Like if he had said, we're going to actually do everything we can to end qualified immunity, I think for people like me who follow this more closely, that would have meant a lot. And if people don't know, qualified immunity makes it basically really hard to hold police accountable after the fact. If he had said, that there should be, part of the problem is that policing is so local in the United States. And so I don't even know if this is possible, but like the issue where police are often the ones investigating when there's police violence, I think is structurally a big problem, and it creates a lot of mistrust. If he had talked about how a lot of the post 9/11 and budgets that sent a lot of military equipment to the police, that we were going to sort of step back from that. So, I mean, I walk a kind of tightrope, if you will, between I don't think of myself as an abolitionist, which is where a lot of the energy is, I think, in parts of Black Lives Matter and the response. And I don't think defund the police, like I never understood it as a policy thing. I understood it as an important slogan, right? So I believe in and there's not great messaging, but personally, I believe in much more radical police transformation, and that municipal and county and state budgets should spend much less. Like if safety is the outcome, it's a little bit like health, right? If wellness is the outcome, what are you spending money on, right? So if we're spending a lot of money on treating diseases as opposed to causes, there's an issue there. So I didn't see that language, and I haven't paid a lot of attention. I hope there's not a lot of blowback, but I hope it doesn't go down as a kind of Sister Souljah moment where a lot of people thought he was.
That I've heard about that part of the speech, really. Right, what we're talking about right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't really heard anything. I'm glad that he wasn't tone deaf to the fact that we have had some issues recently, that we see crime, looking at crime rates. I think that he would have been tone deaf if he did not say something about it. And then he also defined in that whole paragraph beforehand what he means by it. So
and you're absolutely right that to me is the political problem, right? Is like, in some places in Philly or in other places, we absolutely need the most passionate people who respond to the message of defund the police. And they themselves, I would say, also need to understand that a lot of people in those communities are very worried about safety. So, if I were in the room advising him, I would have said, you want to be not vulnerable. And I wish I had a not checker or sorry with me, but I would think something, even, relying on what you and I both know from race class narrative, instead of talking about funding the police, saying what we all want is safety, no matter where we are. And the ways to do that is to provide more resources for communities to figure out what safety means, right? And instead of the way he said it. So I don't want to spend a lot more time on it. But to me, it's something that, like, to my ears, I was like, this might be something that causes some concern in the broad lefty coalition. If we have time for maybe one more topic or one more quote, one that I thought was interesting, and it came before that, and it was his attempt to talk about inflation. And he says, lowering costs also means, because he's talking about the need to lower costs, lowering costs also means demanding more competition. I'm a capitalist, but capitalism without competition is not capitalism. Capitalism without competition is exploitation. It drives up prices. So, I'll go first. I like that a lot. I tend to be very in favor of economic populist messaging. For me, if there was a takeaway line that I liked, it was probably that one. And also the pictures of Joshua, the kid with insulin. I mean, that's my favorite. I'm going to say that's my favorite part of the State of the Union. I get kind of bored with I don't love political speeches because to me, they all kind of sound the same and kind of vague. I love the anecdotes, but anyway, from what I could, from his delivery, he delivered that really well. That was one of my favorite lines.
I think his punchline in that section was about raising wages, not raising prices. That's the takeaway right there. And in fact, he also doubled down on the idea that there were also those companies who were cheating, in the rescue plan, and how they're forming to go after those people, right?
I,
That are
I
corporations.
have that real quick if you want. You know, he says tonight I'm announcing a crackdown on those companies overcharging American businesses and consumers, including, as I think you were alluding to, going back and tracking down some of the fraud and abuse from the PPP and the CARES. Because I mean, that's one of the things is people on the right sometimes complain about government. We had to act fast. And when you act fast, there's going to be people who take advantage of it. And now's the time to go back and hold people accountable. I think I cut you off. I'm sorry.
When we're talking about rising prices, there was a big section, and he hit this really early on in the speech. And of course, putting on my union hat, my healthcare hat, he talked about the price of prescription drugs once again, and how that is really a burden for everyone in America, how we pay the highest prices in the whole world because we're not allowing our own government to negotiate. And why aren't we allowing that? It goes right back to corporations. So, and plus there were other healthcare things. You had prescription drugs. You had the new, the next phase of fighting the pandemic that we're in. And there was also a nice big section about nursing homes and private equity funds, which is for profit and all stuff too, which was a very important part of the speech. So there was a lot in there for the American people in terms of rising prices. And he also was square with us too about what's happening in Ukraine and the fact that there might be, some economic, results as a part of that. And they're trying to really, really pinpoint and make sure that it has maximum effect on the Russian government, but we have to live in the real world. There's going to be some blowback here. We need to stand for where we are. We need to walk our talk, right? And that's part of it. So so this was all a part, and I love the ability to transition from these big topics, like you just raised up, like the idea of talking about high prices. What are high prices? Like prescription drugs and waste and fraud and the idea of raising wages, not raising prices, and the responsibilities that are there. And so I thought honestly I felt really good about the whole thing and laying that out, and I felt that it could function as a pivotal point in what's happening internationally and also domestically at the same time.
For sure. I also I'm kind of go more to sort of the genre of the speech, and I hope maybe there's some things here to laugh about a little bit. Like I already said, I don't love political speeches. I hate the clapping in this one. I'm like, it just makes it go longer, and I did some live tweeting. I was like, if applause were an Olympic sport, we would win the over 60 medals, because like all of, we compared to, I've seen in Parliament, like we have more applause per big speech than like any other country. I'm just like, the whole thing would have been a nice 38-minute speech instead of being like 58 minutes if they didn't friggin' applaud so much. I don't know if that, bugs you at all.
I don't think it does. It's not that long. I think we can spend, how long was the whole thing?
It was about 58. I'm saying 30. I think the speech delivered as it was written would have been, I'm making this up. It would have been a nice speech, but I have ADHD, if that's, big surprise. So I get distracted.
I think I have 1 hour to hear what the state of my country is over the course of like several months. Where are we? Especially when so many big things are happening in the world. I thought it was a good moment to check in. This is a great time for the president who we elected to actually check in with the American people and just kind of address the big things in the room that people are talking about and offer a clear path for us.
And you said you watched it. You didn't just listen to it. Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off?
In fact, what I did was that evening I was busy. And so what I did was the next morning, I read several articles about it. And the only reason was I was at the gym and my earphones were not working because I was going to do double work. And then when I got home, I just pulled it up on YouTube, watched the whole thing, took some notes, thought about it a little bit. And then I was prepared because it was the next morning. I get up really early. So I was at, when the gym opened, I was there. So I was able to kind of process all that. And I was ready for the next day because, my coworkers were talking about it. People in our union were talking about it. I just didn't feel right not doing that homework and being plugged in. And I was glad that I did.
So I don't know, if they're all the same. I watch the New York Times feed, and I don't know if there's one feed that goes to all of the networks, but I became really fascinated with who's making the decision about when to move the camera to someone else, because some of them made sense, right? And then, for example, when he's talking about the woman who was a widower and her I think she's from North Carolina, and Joshua, the really cute kid who has diabetes and insulin. But like there was one place where it went to Mansion, and it wasn't to me any obvious reason you would go to Mansion, right? And then there was also when I'm going to butcher her name, Judge Jackson Brown. Is that her? Is that the nominee for the Supreme Court? He said her name, and it's like they knew they wanted to show judges. I don't think she was there because they just panned out to where the Supreme Court justices are sitting. So it wasn't her. So it was like they had set up a thing that's like, when we pan, we're going to be showing you somebody who's relevant. And then that one was just kind of like a bit of a flub. So, you know, it's got to be really high stakes producing. Maybe it's because I do a podcast now, but I was just really kind of like interested in like, how are you deciding who to show? Like one of my favorites is when he said that capitalism is capitalism without competition is exploitation. They went to McConnell, who looked not too happy. You know, Senator McTurtleneck did not look very happy being lectured.
I mean, when does he really look happy? Even when he smiles, it's kind of.
That's true. That's true.
Oh,
and one of my favorite things, which I'd never noticed before, and again, I don't know if this is the New York Times feed. If you watch past the end on the New York Times feed, the camera stayed with him, and I got to see. You know, it's like the biggest wedding reception line in the world. Like, who's there? And you can kind of see people, you know, when you've been at like a conference and like they're on the periphery. There was a woman with like dyed purple hair. And because I was live tweeting this, somebody, I didn't know who she was, said she's in charge of the appropriations committee. And I could hear, this was the fun part, Dwayne, I could hear people being, great speech. I liked this, you know, like to me, that was like kind of interesting to see the immediate response that his supporters were having.
Yeah, I don't know really how it works, Jordy, but I know there's like advanced releases of what's in the speech. I'm sure the networks got those, and I'm sure as soon as they grab them, they are right to work, doing the run of show, looking at the speech, deciding, okay, what can we do at this moment? At this moment, do we know who's going to be there? And kind of like have a kind of a rough draft of how they're going to run it, and then. You know, they might have to do a few things on the fly, depending on who's actually in the room versus who was supposed to be and where they are versus where they're supposed to be, you know, whatever that might be. So, you know, it's really hard to just look at someone for a full hour. They need to do something. And so.
Oh, no, I'm not objecting to the cutting away. Oh, man, this platform, I'm having issues where I think you're done. But anyway, did I cut you off?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. No, I'm not objecting to them cutting away. It was just like, you know, it is really, to me, it's really interesting, right? Like, okay, he's talking about this part. Who should we cut to, right? Like, I didn't see any of Kristen Sinema. Two shots of Mansion, none of Sinema.
She there?
Maybe I don't know. Maybe she wasn't. The other thing that I just want to throw out, because I'm ridiculously proud of myself for this. So as I said, I was live tweeting with, or maybe, I don't know if I said this, on our Barnstorming PA account, because it helps me stay focused, actually. So at one point he mentioned immigration and the wall, and there was a very brief build the wall chant, and I think it was Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene. But what I tweeted, I was really happy with this because it faded away really quickly. I don't even know if you noticed it on YouTube, but
I did see her where they focused on her and she was not looking happy. And when she's not looking happy, the rest of America should smile.
That's good. That's probably better than what I'm about to say. So good job stealing my thunder. No. But so I was like, a brief build the wall chant fades away, and like the real wall, it's short, pointless, short, ineffective, and pointless.
That's funny. Oh my goodness. Yeah. You know, it's kind of funny when you think about messaging, and this is something that I think, you know, it makes me think about that, like, and so much of it is around almost the identity, like, of the Democratic Party. We're supposed to be the big tent, and we're supposed to bring as many people as we can, and we don't like confrontation, and, you know. But honestly, if I make someone like her frown, then I'm probably saying the right things, right? And she's happy about something I'm saying, then what am I saying? Like, I shouldn't be saying it. Are you kidding? Like, that's not who I am. It's not really looking out for the American people. It just is not doing that. It's serving another person, you know, or a corporation, or some other kind of political goal, or, you know, it's red meat to division. You know, it's just not things I should be saying. So I always think whenever I'm looking at like samples, and, you know, I always look at like the idea. I think we need an opposition that is not happy with what we're saying, when you think about what the opposition is saying right now. You know?
I want to come back to one thing. I told you in the private chat I wanted to wrap up, but I actually think this is important. Like, and you said this. He talked about the high prices and bringing prices down. We need all the Democratic people who are running to talk about that. Like, there's some weird things going on in the economy, and you and I've talked about this offline. By weird, I mean, in some places, maybe wages are going up because of tight labor markets and other things. But like, we all know that the $4 gas and that price inflation, that's really, hitting a lot of working people hard in the pocketbook, and they need help. And part of the reason they need help, and I don't need to convince you of this, Dwayne, but we've had 30 years of corporate oligarchy, basically, that's kept wages down while corporations make huge profits. So people don't have any kind of cushion. But in terms of the Ukraine, I don't know of anybody in America who's really like, let's send our troops, right? Like, and as a politician, right, like that would be a really hard thing to do, right? To send troops to the Ukraine right now. Russia is a scary proposition. But I've been thinking about this, and like, if we're willing to suffer some as a people to help those people, then the inflation is part of that. Like, I don't think he shouldn't address inflation, but you know what I'm saying? Like, let me start over. What's happened that I think has been good has been this crackdown on the Russian economy. And as I understand it, shutting down their access to the international banking system will make it harder for Russian oil and natural gas to be sold. Germany has canceled a pipeline. And part of the problem here is that Western Europe, for a long time, has been hoping to be able to buy Russian oil and natural gas and not have to really deal with Putin. And now the question's called, right? And so what I've been tweeting and saying a little bit is, if we want to defend democracy everywhere, we all have to decarbonize now. And so I think we need to address the problems that people are having with paying gas in the United States and working families. And there's a lot of ways to do that. But if one of the things that comes out of this is we think how quickly we developed the mRNA vaccine, got it out. Like, we need, he talked about a moonshot for cancer, and I think that's great. We need that mentality around decarbonizing, because between the Middle East, Russia and Ukraine, like, these are all fundamentally resource conflicts, and and we don't need to drill more. We don't need more fracking in Pennsylvania, because that's just going to be gas that's sold to Europe anyway. We know that. Yeah. I don't know if you want to respond to that, but
yeah, I think that is wonderful, Jordy, and I can envision a world, and we can even think about what would Europe's response be if they were not dependent on that energy resource for Russia? How quickly would they all have united? Because they could be like, you know what, we don't need your freaking oil.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need it, right?
Right.
So, and imagine a world where that part of, like, the energy is green, it's renewable, it creates jobs, like, and we can move towards that. And I love the idea of raising that up to the level of the moonshot, kind of, or the amazing,
in fact,
we did with vaccines. Like, that's incredible. Like that, or the push for whatever it might be. I love that idea. And
in fact, I would call it an earth shot.
I like that. That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
We got one planet, right? We got to get it right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Really far from that.
So,
and doing that is like, that's like a win-win-win-win. Win for the economy, win for the environment, win for, like, our own sources of energy. Like, why shouldn't every house that we have solar panels on it, right? Like, even independent, because there's corporations that don't want it to happen. That's why, right? And there are politicians who are beholden to that. That's the reason why they have that shit going on in Florida. Like, if Germany can, on days, like peak times, like, take care of all their energy or half of their energy needs, like, through solar, could we do that? It's like, well, it's not always, the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine.
Oh, I know. And it's also, this.
Like, have you ever heard of a battery? Like, I mean, it's just absurd. Like, the idea, like, it's just, the only people that are saying those things are people who they're sheep. They have bought into the corporate messaging and to the conservative messaging around that we can't have good things. Right?
Yeah.
It's the same stuff, right?
Right.
Even though we can give example after example after example of how other countries are doing it, right? Why don't we have a good rail system in this country? We're so goddamn good, right? What the hell?
I have a quick thing I want your feedback on. As part of Barnstorming PA, and I should be better about this, we do have T-shirts now. You can go onto our website and get a T-shirt with our cool logo.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, you can get lots of sizes, lots of colors. It's print on
I
demand.
love
So
our logo. It's so cool. And it has like those the lightning bolts coming out. It reminds me a little bit of like Rocky Horror Picture Show.
do
Like
you
the,
know? Do you know what those colors are?
Red, blue, yellow, green.
They are the official color palette of the Pennsylvania flag.
Oh, wow! Look at you. You got into needs there.
But like we looked at them. We just looked at them as a palette because the Pennsylvania flag is really dominant with, I think, that dark blue. But that
Dark blue,
when you make them equivalent like that, I think it's a really nice palette. I discovered that.
The wheat is yellow in our flag. Colors now. Yeah, the blue and red. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I didn't look at that.
But you learn something every day. So one of the ideas we have for some merchandise, we have some ideas for merchandise, T-shirts or mugs or tote bags or things, but Taylor and I come up with ideas of things that are not per se barnstorming, but we'll sell them and hopefully help support the podcast. But one of them would be, going to what you're saying, my other car is a train.
I love that. That's really cool. Yeah, that's really good, Jordy. I like that. Yeah.
Another one you're gonna love. Here, I'm gonna go ahead and show you. Give me half a sec because you're gonna love this. It'll just take me half a sec. Hex signs on barns, of course.
You live in like Pennsylvania, right?
Yeah. That's right. So we took we found a designer, right, and we took a couple. We gave them some examples of classic hex signs, and we were kind of thinking about things that we could do that would. And so we have these preliminary designs. So like one is our logo, but done in the style of like a hex sign.
Oh, really? That's it, because it's barnstorming, right?
Yeah, exactly. Here, I'll go ahead and show them to you, and hopefully no one will like screenshot it and like steal from us. Okay.
You just gave them an idea. You know that, right?
Right. So that's our same logo, but in that, with the border, right? You can see that.
Yeah. I see it. It's a real not. There's the hex signs that you can see.
But this one, I think I love this.
That's really cool, Jordy. Can you send that to me? That's funny shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What we're looking at for those people that are just listening, it's like a rebranded hex sign that has these two donkeys that are mirroring each other, with a star. That star is always iconic sign at the flowers, and then beneath it says "Elect Democrats" in a very hex-like looking font. It's it's cool.
Yep. It's like the same font that would be like "Ye Old Bavarian Inn," like that kind of very.
Yeah. Oh, it's really that's funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
That one's going to be. I think that one's one of our better ones, and we actually there's one. It's completely modeled. There's one that instead of the donkeys, it's unicorns, and it says something in German. And the other thing, actually, it turns out there's this is one of the things I love about small town life in Pennsylvania. There's somebody who works at a coffee shop who's an artist, and I was telling her about this, and she's painted hex signs herself, and she might come on and kind of talk about hex signs and their history. And, they of course come from the German farmer roots in this area. But they themselves in Germany, because they were in Germany too, they do tie into some of those nature oriented older traditions that even persisted through, all of the Christianization. So, it's kind of a cool little thing. I'm going to plug two things real quick. One, besides our merchandise, tomorrow from 5 to 6:30 in Williamsport, some folks with something called DAAMA, which I think is direct action and mutual aid or something like that. They've organized a spontaneous solidarity, anti-imperialist, anti-war solidarity rally and protest. So, kudos to people. And we didn't even get to say this. You and I have done a lot of street protests, and we have a lot of protections in America. Thousands of Russians were protesting this war. Like, those are my heroes. Like, in Russia, they are taking on risks that I can't even imagine. So anyway, so that's Friday, and next week, next Thursday at 10. Is that right?
10
You
a.m.
want to talk about?
Yeah, so that's exciting. So I'm glad you're mentioning this. So tune in next Thursday live at 10 a.m. to Barnstorming PA, because we are going to have some frontline healthcare workers on the call with us, talking about what's happening in this moment, but also lifting up the idea that I mentioned earlier, that no matter where you live, what you look like, we all have families, we all have friends, we all have relatives, we all have loved ones that we know need the best health care possible. And we're going to talk a little bit, dig in. We're also going to talk a little bit about what's happening in our state legislature around healthcare and how we are so close. I'm pinching my fingers together. We are this close to getting some safe staffing bill passed. And there's just one thing that's holding us back, and it's not the number of votes in our House. We got those. There's something else that's holding us back. I'm not going to tell you what it is. Her name is Kathy Rapp. We'll talk about it next week. Look it up, do your homework, and let's talk about it next week, and let's see where we are. And hopefully something will change and we'll be thrown off and we won't mention it at all, or we'll just talk about the victory of actually this and what this will mean to everyday.
I'm so excited, like you did, like, such a pro job teasing that, the mystery of what's the one thing. I can't wait to find out.
So close, Jordy. All the things. Yeah, so close. Because this goes across all kinds of healthcare, in nursing homes or in hospitals, or this whole concept of home nursing, a state-run facility, all of the things. There's one thing that if that was somehow fixed, it would dramatically change our healthcare outcomes in the state for our relatives and everyone's care at some point. So it'll help all of us. We're that close. And we could be a leader too. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, like church announcements that never end. Last thing. We got to give a huge hug and shout out and lots of love to our fellow Barnstormer and ally in many fights. Jess Stewart Britton and her husband Larry Britton had a loss of Larry's father, also Larry, and I know she's been in our thoughts, and they're doing the mourning process. So shout out to them.
Yeah, Jess, we love you.
We love you, Jess.
Hugs.
Bye, everybody.